Hey subscribers and watchers from Slide Nerd, this is Vivs here. In the last video I was talking about how to add tabs to the action bar. In this video let me continue our discussion by implementing the view pager here so that we can complete our swipe tabs. In the meantime, if you guys haven't seen the last video, please go back and check it because this is merely a continuation of what I was doing there. So if you go to our activity_main.xml, if you guys remember, there is a view pager. So let's try to bring this view pager here in Java code by saying view pager. So at this point it's not initialized. I need to initialize it the same way which I do all the time by saying find view by id r.id.pager, alt enter over here. Oops, it's control 1 over here. I'm using Eclipse after a long time, I guess. So add the typecasting over here. So at this point our view pager is in Java code. Now the view pager is solely responsible for changing the fragments based on the user swiping. So if you guys remember, it requires an adapter to tell it where and whom to get at what position. So for that we'll have to make an own adapter to the view pager. So let me go down here in our main activity, create my own adapter. My adapter, I'll call that extends fragment pager adapter. Again, there are two adapters out there, the fragment state pager adapter and the fragment pager adapter. If you guys haven't seen the previous video, please go back and check it out because I have clearly explained the difference between both the adapters and which one is appropriate. For here, I will stick with fragment pager adapter. So this has a method called getItem. It is responsible for getting the fragment at a given position. The view pager calls the adapter and tells the adapter that, hey, give me the fragment at position 0. So here inside this getItem method, you're supposed to do that. So what are we going to do? Very simple. We're going to check if arg0 equals 0. If I'm at position 0 or index 0, then return what is called fragment f. I'll call it fragment equals to null for now. I'll say fragment equals new fragment a. That means at position 0, return fragment a. If the position is 1, return fragment b, and so on. So let me actually replicate the if-else statement here and kinda get that over with. So at this point my getItem method is complete. Whenever the view pager says give me something at position 0, fragment a will be returned, at position 1 b, and at position 2 c will be returned. Now getCount method is supposed to tell the view pager how many pages are there. Since we have 3 fragments, getCount should return 3, and we are pretty much done with the adapter. Now we just need to set the adapter here by going up. Right here I'm saying view pager dot set adapter, which can be something like this, and I'm gonna say new my adapter, and I just need to pass the fragment manager inside. If you guys remember, since we are using fragment activity, I will use the get support fragment manager inside my constructor over here. I'll say get support fragment manager, and that should take care of anything. If you guys are finding this a little tricky, you can obviously go ahead here and make the fragment manager by saying fragment manager is get support fragment manager, and then here pass that manager object because our constructor in the my adapter requires a fragment manager, and that is the reason I'm doing that. So this pretty much takes care of everything. Let's just see, there's some kind of error over here. Okay, there's an extra bracket. So at this point everything looks pretty good as far as the action bar tabs and the fragments are concerned. Now let's just run this and try to figure out what is going on here. So at this point, if you guys notice our emulator, there is the tab and there is the view pager. Now if I switch from fragment A using the view pager, I go to fragment B because getItem is called, right? Same way I go here, I can go to fragment C. But notice something, nothing is happening here in the tabs above. If I click tab 2, nothing happens except that these lifecycle log.d statements are being called over here. If I click tab 3, nothing happens. So what we want to do is synchronize the changes in the tab with the changes here in the view pager. So before we do that, let's try to understand a method or a listener which the view pager uses to keep track of which page it is currently showing and what is the user doing with that page. For that I'll go back here and implement something called onPageListener. I think that's the name, I'm not sure about it. Let me go here and I'll say view pager dot set on page change listener. Yep, that's the one. So here I'll simply make an anonymous inner class by saying new on page change listener. So for the listener, make sure that when you use the anonymous inner class, you specify the fully qualified class name, which is the view pager, which is the outer class, dot in on page change listener, which is the name of the interface over there. So we have 3 methods over here, which is on page selected, on page scrolled, and on page scroll state changed. So let's try to understand what these methods are all about, and that can be done by using a simple log.d statement which tells us what is going on. So here at position, which is not given by this argument 0 over here, so I'm gonna just put argument 0 over here. So let me actually replicate the same kind of statement for the other two and get back to you guys with that. So at this point I have my log.d statements in place inside those methods, and here is a little tricky case. On the on page scroll state changed, we have an argument which is not the position. However, it is the state, whether the the page is being idle, or is it being dragged by the user, or is it settling down that the user has finally brought it into position, something like that. You guys will see this more in action when we just run this program in a few moments from now. But before that, let's remove this on tab log.d statement, because we don't want to get confused about which method is calling, because that's way too many log.d statements out here. So now the view pagers methods are going to be the ones that will be explored in detail. So the on page scroll, on page selected, on page scroll state changed, and here there's the on page change listener, which basically tells if the user is changing the pages or not. So let's run this app at this point and try to figure out what is going on. So at this point, if you guys notice, our app is up and running, and it says on page scrolled at position 0, which is the first fragment, right? And from pixel 0.0, that floating number, and it says number of pixels. Now if I just click over here, it says on page scroll state changed. So first it thinks that I'm trying to drag the page, and then it goes into idle mode again. Now if I actually perform the work of dragging it, now notice carefully, for every little drag, you'll notice the changes over there. This value of the float, which is the second parameter, goes from 0 to 1 over here, and it comes back to 0 because I did not scroll completely through the page. Now let me actually show you. And then it says page scroll state changed to idle, because again it is at rest. But now if I just swipe this across completely, going to fragment B, you guys will notice that on page scrolled starts getting called from position 0, 0.1, 0.04, 166. It went to 0. From here it goes 36, 0, 93, blah 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 blah, and there it ultimately comes somewhere to position number 1. Here if you guys notice, it says at position 1, which is nothing but our second fragment, and it has ultimately come there. And at the same time, somewhere over here it says on page selected at position number 1. So again, if I go from fragment B over here, if I keep scrolling, notice the method calls over there. It says 0.1, 88, 9187, what numbers it's keep printing over there, right? And if I put here, notice it also shows number of pixels that I'm trying to scroll. Even as I move them on the screen, it's giving me the number of pixels that are being scrolled over here. You guys can clearly see that, right? So these two methods about the on page scroll and the on page scroll state changed are not really important. What matters to us is this, which says on page selected. Currently, what page is being seen by the user. So let's remove the log.d from those other two over here, and now running this again and trying to understand what is exactly happening with our view pager as far as the page selection is concerned. Now the reason why I showed those other two methods is because in the last video I had promised you guys that I'll clearly explain what is going on with those other two methods over there, so you guys can see what is happening kind of there, right? So here once again our app is running at this point, and let us try to examine the log.d from our on page selected. Right now it is at fragment A, and there is no sign of anything here on the logcat. But if I move all the way to fragment B, it says on page selected at position number 1. So remember, based on this change at position number 1, we have to change from tab 1 to tab 2. Then if I go again from fragment B to fragment C, same, it says on page selected at position 2. Based on the same change, I have to highlight tab 3 now, and that is how the linking is going to take place. In other words, what we have is a bunch of buttons here at the top that are not working currently. Based on the changes in the view pager, we have to set the appropriate button to be active. And based on the appropriate tab clicking over here, I have to make sure that the content below also changes. So that is the linking that we need to perform. So now let me finish this. Now if you guys remember, to actually link the view pager's change with the action bar and the action bar's changes with the view pager. So first let's do for the view pager. If you guys remember, every time the view pager changes a page, it directly goes here to on page selected. Here, all we need to do is get the action bar by saying action bar dot set selected navigation item at the same position, which means, in other words, you're telling that if page number 1 is selected by the user, then the tab selected should also be equals to number 1. That is all you're doing over here. So that pretty much completes this part. And the only other thing we need to do now is when the tab is selected by the user over here through the action bar, we need to tell that since tab 1 was selected, the view pager should change its selected page to page number 1. And that's exactly what we are going to do here by saying view pager dot set current item. It's going to be tab dot get position. That is all that needs to be done. Remember, here at the top, when the view pager is selecting a particular page, you change the action bar over here. And here at the bottom, when the action bar lets you notify that a particular tab was selected, you change the view pager over here. And that is the basic trick behind making swipe tabs. So now let's run this. But before that, let's just remove those log.d statements. Will probably look very annoying over here. So I'm gonna again run this app here at the top. So here my app is completely running, and as you guys notice, there is tab 1. Now when I click on tab 2, on tab selected will be called, but our view pager will change to fragment B. But if I swipe down here from our view pager to fragment C, our view pagers on page change listener will be called, and on page selected will execute the action bar to make the current tab at tab 3. In other words, change the action bar and you change the view pager, and change the view pager and you change the action bar. Kind of cross relationship. Again, take a look. Go to tab 2 here, it goes to fragment B. Go to tab 1, it goes to fragment A. But here if you swipe down from fragment A, you can go here to fragment B and the tab changes automatically. And this is how swipe tabs are supposed to be made. Now this is a pretty complex bit, I agree with that. You guys can go through the code over here. I'll probably have the code up on GitHub, where I have an account. You can search slide note on GitHub and you'll get everything right over there. So in the meantime, if you guys do like what you saw, please subscribe to our channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comment boxes below, and I'll catch you guys in the later videos. Have a nice day.